Soul Streaming Entry 28. Cries Left Unheard. A living, breathing, audio, and written experience by Sim. As I continue to ascend and raise my level of consciousness, I've started noticing a pattern in the way I move through transformation. I'll have what feels like a brief sequence of downloads, realizations, memories, emotions, and truths moving through me all at once. Sometimes they come rapidly. Sometimes one realization unlocks another one that was sitting underneath it. But once I finally give all of it an outlet, once I create a container where I can face it, speak it, write it, cry through it, and acknowledge it as my truth, something shifts. I've given the energy somewhere to go. I've worked with it, I've transmuted it, and what I've noticed is that there's often a residual period afterward that feels like a mini funeral. I've said often that I'm not afraid of dying. That doesn't mean I'm ready to die. It means death itself doesn't frighten me in the way I think it once could have. I believe I've died so many times throughout this lifetime, and throughout the many lifetimes I believe my spirit has spent on earth, that I've already proven to myself that there is life after death. I've watched versions of myself die. Identities have died. Relationships have died. Belief systems have died. Entire realities that once felt permanent have died. And somehow I continued living. So when the time eventually comes for my spirit to separate from this physical body, I don't carry the same fear around that separation. To me, the spirit doesn't die simply because the body can no longer house it. It changes form. Maybe that is also why I've started understanding the importance of my own funerals. These funerals give me somewhere to acknowledge what happened, grieve what happened, accept what happened, and then consciously choose to move forward. Because whether we're talking about the past, people who have physically passed, relationships that have ended, or people who are still alive but no longer occupy the same place in our lives, something has still ended. I believe contracts are made before we ever get here. I believe those contracts serve everyone involved, even when the experience itself is painful as hell. And when someone physically leaves this earth, I don't necessarily believe the people left behind have been abandoned. If anything, I believe we gain another form of access, another form of guidance, another relationship with that spirit that can propel us forward on our own journeys if we choose to recognize it in that way. The spirit never dies. It may no longer be attached to the body we knew, but to me, it is still very much alive. And I think emotional death can work similarly. When a version of me dies, I don't have to pretend she never existed. I don't have to hate her, erase her, or disconnect myself from everything she experienced. I can honor her and still let her go. I can take the wisdom, the lessons, the love, the evidence, and even the scars forward without continuing to live inside the reality that created them. The funeral isn't me burying my past because I'm ashamed of it. The funeral is me accepting that something has completed its life cycle inside of me. The day after I wrote Entry 27 felt exactly like that. It felt like a funeral for a chapter I had finally allowed myself to close. Not the kind where people gather dressed in black, bringing flowers, and speaking softly about what has been lost. This funeral was private. The day before, I had been angry. I had been heartbroken. I had looked myself in the eyes and told myself the truth. I gave the emotion somewhere to go instead of asking them to disappear. And once the anger finally burnt itself out, grief was sitting underneath it waiting for its turn. I woke up crying. Not because I wanted the chapter back, but because closing something doesn't mean you don't mourn what it cost you to live through it. And those cries weren't unheard by me. That's a distinction I understand now. For a long time, my cries were left unheard by the people around me. There were moments when I needed comfort and didn't receive it. Moments when I needed somebody to notice that I wasn't okay without requiring me to package my pain into language they could understand. Moments when I was surrounded by people and still didn't feel like there was anywhere safe to put what I was feeling. So I learned how to carry an emotion until I could get somewhere that felt safe enough to release it. Looking back, what surprises me is how young I was when I intuitively understood how to do this. There is a difference between emotional avoidance and consciously postponing an emotion. But everybody isn't going to have the same awareness of that distinction. I certainly didn't have the terminology for it when I was younger. I didn't know I was compartmentalizing. I didn't know anything about nervous systems, emotional regulation, somatics, or transmutation. I just intuitively knew I have to deal with what's happening in front of me right now, but I'm going to come back for this feeling. I knew how to put the emotion somewhere without convincing myself that it wasn't there. Maybe that was my earliest form of self-preservation. Because if I didn't feel like my cries were being damn heard anyway, I had to learn how to hear them myself. From reparenter to supporter. What made that day even more interesting was that my grief wasn't the only grief in the room. While I was having my own emotional funeral, my mom was simultaneously moving through what I would describe as a tower moment of her own. Some financial stress had surfaced, and the way she was looking at what was happening, whether she was consciously aware of it or not, was coming from a place of lack, a place of survival, and everything for me is connected. Spirit has a way of using the people who have access to me as reflectors of the choices I need to make for myself. Not because they're doing anything wrong, and not because every person who triggers something in me is consciously trying to teach me a lesson. Sometimes their choices, fears, beliefs, or circumstances simply put me face to face with my own. They become a mirror asking me, do you want to stay in this vibration with what is being reflected back to you? Or do you want to change your wavelength and make a different decision? That day, I had to make a different decision because I know survival. I know lack. I've lived there. I've had to give plenty of bills to God. I've had to move money around. I've had to get creative. I had to be resourceful. I've had to figure shit out when I didn't know how it was going to work. So there was no judgment toward my mother for where she was in that moment. Believe me, I've been there. I've had to move through those lessons myself. And in many ways, I'm still healing the remnants of what living in survival taught my body. But recognizing where somebody is does not mean I have to go there with them. Especially when I've already made a conscious decision as the creator of my life that this is a wound I am healing. And this particular moment went even deeper because it wasn't only asking me whether I was going to reparent my mother or support her. It was happening while I was actively healing my receiving wound. My nervous system was already going the fuck through it. I was grieving, I was releasing, I was trying to allow myself to receive, trust, soften, and stop bracing against life while simultaneously being presented with a reflection of the exact survival frequency I was working to move out of. And now I had a parent leaning toward me for something my energy has historically known how to provide. Whether she was consciously asking me to reparent her or whether she was simply responding to an energetic dynamic that had existed between us for years, I could feel the invitation. And I couldn't accept it. I simply told her, I don't have the answers for you in this moment because I am fighting for my own motherfucking life. And I meant that. Not my physical life. I was fighting for the life I had been consciously creating, the beliefs I had been recoding, the receiving wound I had been tending to, the nervous system I had been teaching that survival does not have to be its permanent address, the version of myself I had been working so hard to become. So I went back into my space. I cleansed, I held myself, and I repeated the truth I needed my body to hear. This is not my truth. This is not my truth. This is not what we have been working toward. This is not the vision. This is not the timeline that I am choosing. This is not my truth. That wasn't me denying what was happening around me. It wasn't me pretending my mother's circumstances weren't real for her. And it certainly wasn't shade toward my mom or where she was in her process. It was me recognizing that another person's reality can be real without becoming my reality. That distinction matters to me now because just because I can recognize a vibration doesn't mean I have to re enter it. Just because I've survived somewhere before doesn't mean I need to move back in every time someone I love finds themselves there. I can remember what survival felt like without allowing survival to become my identity again. I can have compassion for someone else's fear without adopting their fear as evidence about my own future. And maybe that is one of the deepest changes in the way I understand support. I have spent so much of my life reparenting other people that I didn't even realize that was what I was doing. As a child, I learned how to read rooms. I learned how to notice what people needed, what needed to be handled, who was upset, who needed comforting, and where I could step in to make something easier. I reparented siblings. I reparented adults. And as I got older, I reparented friends. I became the person people could live with, lean on, call, cry to, depend on, and regulate themselves through. I knew how to become whatever kind of support the room required. And when you become skilled at carrying everybody, putting yourself last can start feeling normal. You don't necessarily wake up one morning and decide, I'm going to abandon myself for everybody I love. It happens in smaller ways. You become so accustomed to scanning outward that you don't immediately recognize how rarely you're scanning inward. Somebody else's emergency becomes more urgent than your exhaustion. Somebody else's heartbreak becomes more important than the emotions you've been postponing. Somebody else's instability becomes something you instinctively start trying to stabilize. Meanwhile, your own cries get told, give me a minute. And for most of my life, I genuinely believed that was love. I don't say that to shame the version of me who did it. She was loving people with the tools she had. She knew how to make herself useful. She knew how to create safety for other people because she understood what it felt like not to have enough of it for herself. She could walk into emotional chaos and start organizing it. She could absorb tension, offer perspective, find solutions, provide resources, make room, and somehow keep moving. But being capable of carrying something doesn't automatically make it mine to carry. That is one of the hardest distinctions I've had to learn. Because there's a difference between supporting somebody and reparenting them. Support says, I love you, I'm here. What can I reasonably offer from where I am? Reparenting says, give it to me, I'll figure it out for you. Support allows another person to remain responsible for their own life. Reparenting can quietly make me responsible for regulating an experience that doesn't belong to me. And I don't want that job anymore. Not because I've become less loving. If anything, I think I'm learning how to love people without requiring my own abandonment as proof of their love. So while my mother was moving through her tower moment, I could listen, I could care, I could remind her of the resources available to her. I could offer perspective when I had the capacity. But I didn't have to absorb her fear into my body. I didn't have to stop grieving because she was going through something too. And I didn't have to immediately start rebuilding the tower for her, especially while I was standing in the ashes of my own funeral. That is new for me. The old version of me might have instinctively shifted all of her attention outward. She might have decided that somebody else's crisis was more important because she could always come back to herself later. And technically, I usually did come back. That's what I learned to do as a child. Compartmentalize, handle what's in front of me, return to the emotion when there is space. But now, I have enough awareness to ask a different question. Do I actually need to postpone myself right now? Sometimes the answer will still be yes. Life happens. There will be moments when something genuinely requires immediate attention. But every person I love experiencing discomfort does not automatically constitute an emergency for me. Their discomfort is allowed to exist without me rushing in to remove it. Their lesson is allowed to unfold without me figuring out the meaning for them. Their tower is allowed to fall without me standing underneath it trying to catch every brick. That doesn't make me cold. It makes me a supporter instead of a reparenter. And becoming a supporter has required me to trust the people I love more. If I believe every soul came here with its own contracts, lessons, themes, free will, and capacity for growth, then constantly trying to rescue somebody from their experiences contradicts what I say I believe. I can offer what I've learned. I can share what I see. I can remind someone of their power. I can be present while something hurts, but I cannot do their becoming for them. I can plant seeds. Some of those seeds may grow immediately. Some may sit underground for years. Some may never grow at all. Someone may remember something I said long after we stopped talking. Someone else may hear me and decide they're not ready for it. Neither response requires me to stand over the soil, checking every 5 minutes to see if something sprouted. I plant seeds, but I don't have to watch them grow. That has become one of the ways I know I'm no longer confusing love with responsibility. I can love you and leave your lesson with you. I can support you and still hear myself. I can witness your tower falling without abandoning the funeral happening inside of me. And maybe that's part of what all those years of reparenting were eventually meant to teach me. How to recognize the difference between being there for someone and leaving myself to do it. The route changed, the destination didn't. One of the things I'm learning about transmutation is that moving through an emotion doesn't require me to build a home inside of it. I can grieve without deciding that grief gets the rest of my day. I can cry without deciding that sadness gets to write the ending. I can acknowledge disappointment without automatically preparing myself for another one. Feeling an emotion fully and choosing what I want to create next are not opposing things. For me, they're becoming part of the same process. So after allowing myself to grieve, I started pouring some of that energy into creating. Not because I needed to distract myself from what I was feeling. Not because I was trying to slap positivity over pain and call it healing. I had already been inside the emotion. I had cried. I had spoken the truth. I had given the grief somewhere to go. Creating wasn't my escape from that feeling. Creating was what I chose to do with the energy once I had felt it. That's transmutation to me. And lately, I've been realizing how much this requires me to trust something that still feels relatively new in my body. My life does not have to be built around chronic disappointment anymore. That's a big fucking belief to recode when you've had enough experiences that taught you otherwise. There are beliefs the mind can understand long before the body trusts them. I can consciously know that I'm safe to receive. I can consciously believe that life can support me. I can consciously choose a timeline where things work out for me without constantly expecting the other shoe to drop. But if my body has years of evidence stored inside of it that says, don't get too excited, don't expect too much, be prepared to figure it out yourself, then one new belief isn't necessarily going to erase all of that overnight. That's why I think of it as recoding the soul. Not because I believe my soul was coded incorrectly. To me, the soul is also an archive. It carries what I've experienced, what I've learned, what I've believed, and what I've survived. Recoding is an upgrade. It's me consciously changing the belief systems I no longer want running the current version of my life. And upgrades require repetition. They require consistency, vulnerability, surrender. They require me to keep choosing the new belief even when the old ones know exactly which buttons to press. They require me to stop treating every inconvenience as confirmation that disappointment is coming. My 1 year anniversary gave me a small but very real opportunity to practice that. I woke up still emotionally tender from everything I had been moving through. Part of me could still feel the residual grief from the funeral I had just experienced internally. But this was also the anniversary of something I was incredibly proud of, and I wanted to celebrate myself. So I decided that I would. The original version looked different. I had ideas about where I wanted to go, what I wanted the day to look like, where I might sit and record, and how I wanted to commemorate the moment. But plans changed. Places were more crowded than I expected. Time started moving faster than I wanted it to. The day wasn't unfolding according to the picture I had originally had in my head. And I could feel how easy it would have been to turn that into disappointment. That old programming knows how to take a change plan and turn it into a change experience. It knows how to whisper, well, I guess it's not happening the way you wanted it to. And if I'm not paying attention, that can quickly become, so what's the point? But the point hadn't changed. I wanted to celebrate myself. That was the destination. Everything else was just the route. So the route changed. I got myself a brownie, I got my candle, I got my snacks, I came back home, I sat on my bedroom floor and recorded my video from there. And you know what? A celebration was going to happen regardless. Maybe not because I could control every circumstance around it, but because I could remain committed to the intention underneath it. I think that's one of the ways I'm learning to recognize my own power differently. Creation isn't always making everything happen exactly the way I pictured it. Sometimes creation is deciding what something means even after the circumstances change. The park didn't make it a celebration. The perfect setting wouldn't have made it a celebration. The brownie, candle, snacks, or video doesn't even make it a celebration. I did. I was the one deciding that this moment deserved to be acknowledged. I was the one deciding that 1 year of showing up for myself mattered. I was the one deciding that emotional tenderness didn't disqualify me from experiencing joy in the same day. I was the one refusing to let a change route convince me that I had lost the destination. And maybe that's the part of what recording the soul looks like in practice. It isn't always some massive spiritual revelation. Sometimes it's sitting on your bedroom floor with a brownie and a candle, realizing that the version of you who once expected disappointment is slowly learning that she can create something else. And I know what disappointment can look like when we don't know how to regulate it. I've thrown my own fits as a child. Shit, I've had moments as an adult too. So now, when I watch adults completely unravel because something didn't happen the way they wanted it to, sometimes what I'm witnessing looks like an adult sized tantrum. The circumstances may be different and the consequences may be bigger, but underneath it can still be an inner child saying, but this isn't what I wanted. This isn't how it was supposed to happen. That's why change routes have become one of the places where I practice gentle parenting myself. I'm not talking about bottling up disappointment or pretending I'm not irritated when something doesn't work out. I'm not interested in teaching my inner child that she's only allowed to have the emotions I consider spiritually evolved. She can be disappointed. She can be annoyed. She can say, damn, I really wanted that. What I'm learning to pay attention to is how much energy and focus I continue feeding the disappointment after I've acknowledged that it's there. Because at one point, a change plan could easily reinforce an entire belief system. See, things don't work out for me. See, every time I get excited, something happens. See, this is why I shouldn't get my hopes up. And if I want to remodel that belief system, I have to give myself different evidence. I can't keep feeding the old story with all of my attention while simultaneously saying I believe something new. So when the route changes now, I try to gently remind the part of me that may still be expecting disappointment. Baby, the plan changed. That doesn't mean it isn't working out. That's gentle parenting to me. And looking back at that anniversary, I was actually really proud of how gently I reparented myself through it. My plans didn't go the way I expected, but what I ended up creating was exactly what I needed for where I was emotionally. After everything I had purged the day before, maybe I didn't need to be outside somewhere trying to manufacture the version of celebration I originally pictured. Maybe I needed my bedroom floor. Maybe I needed privacy. Maybe I needed my brownie, my candle, my snacks, my camera, and myself. The route changed, but it didn't rob me of anything. If anything, it brought me closer to what I actually needed. Reparenting myself doesn't look the way reparenting everybody else used to look. I'm not trying to control every circumstance so my inner child never experiences disappointment. I'm learning how to stay with her when she does. And maybe that's the real evolution. I stopped trying to parent the whole damn room and started learning how to parent me. Reparenting hindsight emotions. Something else I started recognizing in myself is what I call hindsight emotions. My downloads tend to arrive before my body has completely processed what I've received. It's almost like my consciousness gets the information first. I can have a realization, speak it out loud, write an entire entry about it, understand what something meant, recognize the lesson, and genuinely know that I've moved into a different level of awareness around it. Mentally and spiritually, the information has landed. And then my body is like, okay, girl, what's up? We still have some feelings about this. I've noticed this pattern enough times now that I no longer automatically interpret the emotion that comes afterward as regression. Sometimes I'm not going backward at all. Sometimes my body is simply catching up to somewhere my consciousness has already been. That's what hindsight emotions are to me. They're the emotions that arrive after the awareness. And honestly, my soul streaming entries have started feeling like fucking cliffhangers because of it. I'll write something and think I've reached a revelation, only for my life to come behind it and say, okay, now that you understand it, let's see what your body has to say. The entry captures what I know in that moment, but sometimes the emotional experience of that knowing hasn't completely moved through me yet. Then days later, another layer arrives, another memory surfaces, another feeling asks to be acknowledged. Something happens that reflects the exact thing I just wrote about. And suddenly, I'm living inside the next scene of something I thought I had already explained. But maybe that's because awareness and integration aren't the same thing. A download can happen in an instant. Integration has its own fucking timeline. I think that's one of the things I've had to respect more as I deepen my relationship with myself. Just because I can see something clearly doesn't mean every part of me has arrived at that same understanding. My consciousness may understand why something happened, while my heart is still hurt that it happened. My spirit may recognize the lesson while my nervous system is still responding to the experience. I can know that a chapter is over and still wake up grieving its funeral. Those things don't contradict each other. If anything, recognizing hindsight emotions has given me more compassion for the space between knowing something and embodying what I know. Because there was a time when I might have questioned myself for that. Didn't we already deal with this? Didn't I already understand this? Didn't I already release this? Why the fuck am I feeling this again? Now I understand that knowing isn't always the final stage. Sometimes I receive the information first, and then I have to give my body enough safety to tell me how it feels about what I just learned. And that is where reparenting myself looks completely different now. I don't need every part of me to arrive at the revelation at the same time. I meet myself where I actually am. Not where I think I should be because of how much work I've done. Not where my spiritual awareness says I should be. Not where the version of me who already understands the lesson is standing with her arms crossed, asking everybody else to hurry the fuck up. Where I actually am. If my body needs to cry after my consciousness has already found peace, then we cry. If I'm irritated, I'm irritated. If I need quiet, I give myself quiet. If I need to move, I move. If I need to change the plan, I change the fucking plan. That's what reparenting looks like for me now. It isn't controlling my emotions. It's regulating myself without suppressing myself. There is a difference. Regulation doesn't mean I never get overwhelmed. It doesn't mean I'm always calm. It doesn't mean every difficult emotion gets transformed into gratitude within 15 minutes because I'm spiritually aware enough to know better. Sometimes regulation is recognizing that a wave has arrived and deciding I am not going to fight the ocean. I'm going to ride it. I've learned enough about myself to know that fighting an emotion usually gives more energy. Judging it gives it more energy. Asking myself why I'm still feeling something gives it more energy. But when I can meet myself there and say, okay, this is where we are today, something in me softens. I don't need to turn every wave into a crisis. I also don't need to pretend the wave isn't there. I can let it rise, let it move through me, and trust that it will eventually return to the ocean it came from. And that philosophy has started changing the way I structure my actual life too. My plans have gotten looser. I still make plans. I still get excited. I still envision experiences and decide what I want. But I'm learning to leave enough room inside the plan for life to participate. I don't want to create such rigid expectations that the slightest change feels like something has been taken from me. I don't want my nervous system interpreting every detour as danger or every inconvenience as disappointment. I want enough freedom inside my life to say, okay, that's not happening. What is available now? Because freedom feels better to me than rigidity. And maybe that's another form of reparenting too. I'm giving myself structure without imprisonment, direction without demanding one specific route, desire without making my happiness completely dependent on how the desire arrives. The celebration I gave myself wasn't meaningful because every circumstance cooperated with me. It was meaningful because I didn't abandon the intention when the circumstances changed. And that's becoming increasingly important to me. I don't want my joy to require perfect conditions. I don't want my peace to require everybody around me to be peaceful. I don't want my ability to receive to depend on life delivering everything in the exact packaging I imagine. And I don't want my inner child believing that a changed plan means she has been forgotten again. So when life changes the route, I meet her there. When hindsight emotions arrive, I meet her there. When my body is several steps behind something my consciousness already understands, I meet her there too. I don't drag her toward the revelation. I don't shame her for needing more time. I don't leave her behind because another part of me has already figured it out. I meet myself exactly where I am, and we move forward from there together. Becoming my own biggest fan. Somewhere along the way, I realized I've become my own biggest fan. That doesn't mean I don't appreciate being celebrated by other people. I do. Receiving genuine support, encouragement, acknowledgement, and reciprocity feels good. And I'm learning to let those things reach me without pretending I don't desire them. But my celebration of myself is no longer waiting for an audience. If nobody claps, I still know when I've done something worth celebrating. If nobody understands why a moment is important to me, I can still honor it. If nobody remembers the anniversary, I can buy my own fucking candle. And I think that's beautiful. Because there were versions of me who wanted to be seen so badly. Not necessarily by the whole world, but by the people I love. I wanted someone to notice, someone to recognize how hard I was trying, someone to understand what it took for me to become who I was becoming. Now I get to give myself that witnessing. I get to look at myself and say, girl, I saw that. I saw you choose differently. I saw you get back up. I saw you walk away. I saw you rest instead of pushing yourself past your limits. I saw you create something when nobody was paying attention. I saw you keep your word to yourself. I saw you celebrate when it would have been easier to cancel the whole damn thing. And I am proud of you. That kind of relationship with myself has changed the way I understand showing up. Showing up for myself doesn't mean doing more. Sometimes it means witnessing what I've already done. And lately, I've had an opportunity to do exactly that by revisiting some of my old work. I've been going back through pieces of myself from Thailand. Old recordings, old journal entries, old downloads. Words written by versions of me who were standing in completely different circumstances, but somehow speaking directly into the life I'm living now. And listening to her has been emotional in a completely different way. Because I can hear the seas. I can hear myself dreaming with my eyes wide open before I had evidence for everything I was dreaming about. I can hear the version of me learning what burnout had cost her and beginning to understand that balance wasn't something she needed to earn. I can hear myself wrestling with boundaries, freedom, solitude, receiving, trust, and what is actually meant to build a life that felt like mine. At the time, I couldn't see where all of those realizations were taking me. I was just living them. That's the wild thing about seeds. When you're planting them, you're usually staring at dirt. You don't always get immediate proof that something is happening underneath the surface. Thailand held so many of those seeds for me. There were petitions I wrote that I don't even remember anymore. Some I kept, some I buried into the earth. Some were conversations between me and spirit that were never meant to become something I continuously checked for progress. I wrote them, released them, and kept living. And I'm actually grateful I don't remember every word. Because now when I revisit that season, I'm not sitting there with a checklist saying, okay, did I get this? Did this happen yet? Where's the thing I asked for? Instead, I can feel the energy of what I'm asking for. I wanted freedom. I wanted a deeper relationship with myself. I wanted to trust my own life. I wanted to stop creating from burnout. I wanted boundaries that didn't require guilt. I wanted solitude that didn't automatically translate into loneliness. I wanted to dream while my eyes were open and believe that I could see internally mattered, even before the physical world reflected it back to me. And now, I get to look at my life I'm living and recognize pieces of those petitions without needing to remember exactly what I wrote. Maybe the manifestation wasn't always an object. Maybe sometimes I was the manifestation. The woman reading those old words is evidence that the woman writing them was planting something. And I think that's why revisiting my old work has felt so different lately. I'm not going backward to become those versions of myself again. I'm witnessing them from where I stand now. Every recording sounds like a different part of me. Every entry carries the consciousness I had access to at that moment. Every version knew something the next version would need. And none of them were wasted. The woman who was dreaming with her eyes open mattered. The woman who burned herself out mattered. The woman who had to learn boundaries mattered. The woman who found freedom and solitude mattered. The woman who wrote petitions and buried them without knowing exactly how they would be answered mattered. She mattered before any of the seeds grew. And I don't have to wait until the harvest to recognize what she planted. The woman I was in Thailand planted seeds for the woman I am today. And I know the woman I am today is planting seeds for the versions of me I haven't met yet. Maybe that's one of the greatest gifts of becoming conscious of my own evolution. I get to witness the garden while I'm still growing it. The next evolution. Sometimes survival teaches you how to hold the cry in your throat until you get behind a closed door. How to finish the conversation, finish the task, handle whatever is directly in front of you while internally telling yourself, I know, I feel you, give me a minute, I'm coming back for you. And when you've been doing that since childhood, you can become extremely skilled at functioning while something enormous is happening internally. Eventually, being alone stopped feeling like an absence of other people and started feeling like access to myself. That is what made solitude different for me. It became the place where nothing inside of me had to compete to be heard. I didn't have to translate myself before I could feel myself. I could sit in silence. I could write something. I could pray. I could talk out loud. I could pace the room, lie on the floor, stare at the moon, or just fucking weep. And I mean weep. There is something different about those cries. The ones that don't look pretty. The ones where your face is wet, your breathing changes, your body curls into itself, and you can physically feel something moving through you. Those cries feel like funerals to me. They are what happens when I finally allow an emotion to exist in all of its rawness, pain, anguish, and power without rushing to make it mean something prettier. Because emotions are powerful. Think about how much energy grief carries. Think about heartbreak, betrayal, abandonment, rejection, shame, loss. Think about how one of those emotions can move through your entire body. It can change your breathing, your appetite, your thoughts, your posture, your sleep, your decisions. That's how fucking powerful the energy is. So imagine what becomes possible when you stop only experiencing that power as something working against you and you learn how to work with it. I believe some of the emotions we call lower vibrations and some of the most challenging things we experience on earth can become some of our most powerful energetic tools. Grief carries tremendous energy. So does heartbreak. So does betrayal. So does abandonment. I believe that's part of why we choose certain things before coming here. Not because suffering is some punishment we deserve, and not because pain should be romanticized, but because those experiences contain an enormous amount of energy. And energy can be moved. It can be reshaped. It can be redirected. It can be transformed. It can be transmuted. The same grief that once collapsed you can deepen your capacity to love. The heartbreak that cracks something open can reveal where you abandoned yourself trying to keep someone else. Betrayal can sharpen discernment. Abandonment can force you into a relationship with yourself that you kept looking for through everybody else. The emotion itself isn't necessarily the enemy. Sometimes it is raw material. And maybe the weeping is part of the alchemy. Maybe that is the funeral. Depending on the season of my life, I've called out the spirit, God, source, my ancestors, my guides, the universe. The language has changed as I've changed, but the relationship underneath it has remained. When I couldn't find a human container big enough for what I was carrying, I learned how to create one between myself, my emotions, and whatever I understood to be greater than me. And somewhere along the way, something shifted. I stopped waiting for somebody else to hear me before I believed my cries mattered. I learned the sound of my own distress. I learned what my body feels like before the tears come. I learned the difference between anger that needs expression and anger protecting grief. I learned when I need comfort, when I need silence, when I need movement, when I need nature, when I need to speak, and when I simply need to sit beside myself without trying to turn the feeling into a lesson. I learned that hearing myself doesn't always mean immediately fixing what hurts. Sometimes hearing myself means saying, yes, I know that hurt. I'm here. Maybe that is one of the deepest forms of reparenting I have ever given myself. My cries may have gone unheard by other people throughout different chapters of my life, but they are not unheard anymore. I hear them now. I know how to return for them. I know how to create enough space for them to finish what they came to say. And I think I finally mastered something I spent most of my life needing from somebody else. I know how to hear my own cries. But I'm realizing that mastery isn't the finish line. Maybe it's actually what prepares me for the next evolution. Because learning how to hear my own cries was necessary. But I don't believe I learned how to become a safe place for myself just so I could spend the rest of my life being the only safe place I ever know. There's a difference between knowing I can hold myself and believing I must always hold myself alone. And I don't want to confuse the two. For so much of my life, self reliance was necessary. If I didn't feel heard, I learned to hear myself. If I didn't feel held, I learned to hold myself. If there wasn't enough room for what I was carrying, I learned how to create the room. I'm grateful for that version of me. She built a home inside of herself. But a home can have doors. And I think I'm learning that mine can open without me abandoning myself in the process. The next evolution isn't handing my cries back to somebody else and making them responsible for them. It isn't returning to the version of me who needs another person to regulate, but I haven't learned how to hold. It's allowing myself to remain my own reparent while building relationships with people who are safe enough to witness me too. People who don't require me to become smaller before they can sit beside me. People who don't immediately try to fix what I'm feeling because my emotions make them uncomfortable. People who can hear a cry without assuming it means I'm broken. People who understand that sometimes witnessing is the support. And just as I'm learning to allow safe people into my own emotional world, I'm changing the role I play in theirs. I don't want people to need me to become their reparent. I don't want my love to create dependence. I don't want to be somebody's permanent emotional regulator because I'm good at knowing what to say, good at reading energy, good at finding the lesson, or good at holding space. I want to help people hear themselves. I can support, I can reflect, I can plant seeds, I can hold space while somebody finds their own answer. But I don't have to become the answer. Maybe that's what reciprocity looks like at this stage of my life. Not people rescuing each other. Not people abandoning themselves to prove how deeply they love. Not one person becoming the emotional home while the other gets to continuously arrive at the door carrying everything they haven't learned how to hold. Hold people who have learned how to return home to themselves and still choose to open the door for each other. Because I know how deeply I can meet myself now. I know how I listen to myself. I know how I sit with myself. I know how I celebrate myself. I know how I return for the parts of me I once had to postpone. And I think some of my deepest work now is allowing my relationships to reflect that same depth back to me. Not because I need another person to complete the work I've done within myself, but because I no longer believe doing the work means I have to do everything alone. Maybe my cries had to go unheard long enough for me to learn their language. Maybe I needed the solitude. Maybe I needed the funerals. Maybe I needed to learn how to sit beside myself while something inside of me died, changed form, released, and became something new. But now I know the language. I know the sound. I know how to answer. And maybe the next chapter isn't about learning how to cry louder so somebody finally hears me. Maybe it's about being discerning enough to recognize the people who don't need me to. I know how to hear my own cries now. The next evolution is allowing myself to be heard. My legacy thread. Healthy parenting isn't only about how you care for a child when something hurts. It's about how you celebrate them too. It's being excited because they're excited. It's noticing the small things. It's encouraging them before there's evidence that they're going to succeed. It's sitting in the audience, whether they're playing the lead or standing in the back of the school, play dressed like a fucking tree. It's being proud of them simply because they're yours. Maybe reparenting yourself deserves that same kind of love. Don't only show up for yourself when you're hurting. Learn how to become your own biggest fan. Witness yourself. Notice when you choose differently. Celebrate the promises you keep to yourself. Be proud of the things nobody else knows were difficult for you. Buy your own candle. Create your own celebration. Clap for yourself before anybody else understands why you're clapping. You don't have to wait until the harvest to celebrate the version of you who planted the seed. Celebrate yourself while your hands are still covered in dirt. Celebrate yourself when you're still figuring it out. Celebrate yourself in the middle. Celebrate yourself when the audience is full, when the audience is empty, and when the only person sitting in the front row is you. Because healthy love doesn't only arrive when you've accomplished something impressive. Sometimes healthy love simply says, you're mine. I see you. I'm proud of you. Keep going. A whisper for you. Maybe there are cries inside of you that were never given the space to finish, not because you refused to feel them. Maybe life required you to keep moving. Maybe you became the strong one, the dependable one, the person who knew how to read the room and carry what everyone else couldn't. Maybe you learned how to postpone yourself so well that somewhere along the way, you forgot you were supposed to come back. Come back. Not to fix yourself, not to force a revelation, not to turn every wound into wisdom before it has finished hurting. Just come back and listen. Let yourself be disappointed without deciding your life is disappointing. Let yourself grieve without building a home inside of grief. Let the plan change without believing you've lost the destination. Let your body catch up to truths your spirit may already understand. Let yourself plant seeds without digging them back up looking for proof that they're growing. And when the cry comes, hear it. You can become the person who says, I know, I feel you, I'm here. But don't mistake learning how to hold yourself for a life sentence of holding yourself alone. You are allowed to become your own safe place and still desire safe places in other people. You are allowed to support without rescuing. You are allowed to receive without bracing. You are allowed to celebrate yourself before the harvest. You are allowed to open the doors of the home you've built inside yourself to people who know how to enter without destroying it. Maybe the goal was never to become so healed that you stopped needing anyone. Maybe it was to learn the sound of your own cries so clearly that you no longer have to scream to know they matter. Hear yourself, honor what you hear, and when it feels safe, let yourself be heard too. Here are your journal prompts for this week's entry. Please answer them honestly. Number 1. What cries have I postponed because there wasn't enough safety or space to fully feel them? And what would it look like to return for them now? Number 2. Where in my relationships am I genuinely supporting someone? And where might I still be reparenting, rescuing, regulating, or carrying something that belongs to them? Number 3. When plans change or disappointment appears, what old belief about my life gets activated? And what new evidence am I intentionally giving myself instead? Number 4. What hindsight emotions might my body still be processing, even though my mind or spirit already understands the lesson? What would meeting myself exactly where I am look like right now? Number 5. Now that I am learning how to hear, hold, celebrate, and return to myself, what would it look like to build relationships where I feel safe enough to be heard, held, celebrated, and supported by others too? Thank you for witnessing this soul stream. Return to it whenever you need to come home to yourself. Until next time, stay soft, stay true, and keep streaming your soul your way. Love, Sim.